Please welcome Matthias Dybing, co-founder and director of Nuvho, Matt Taylor, co-founder and CEO of Resme, Timothy Chek, senior customer success manager for Triptease, Andrew Boocock, sourcing regional manager Pacific Hotelbeds, Nick Jeffery, VP sales and account management Sabre, and a very, very special guest flown down all the way from Bangkok, haven't you, Timothy? Just for this, haven't you? Timothy Hughes is the Vice President, Corporate Development for APAC for Agoda, is coming from Bangkok for the conference. Please welcome the panel.
Hi, how are you doing, everybody? So we've got quite a few panelists here, so we're going to keep it nice and snappy and short. So we obviously quite a few people that coming from overseas as well. So thank you for being here. I probably have delivered a slide that I wanted to sort of put on screen, and it's something that was done 2017, but sort of came out around 2018-19, and it was most popular type of website for hotel shopping. And I think if we're going to start thinking about the guest pass to booking, has it changed or is it the same, we need to have a look at the stats ultimately. So what this was telling you, in Australia, 73% of people search on OTAs, 71 then go to a meta, and then 21 only looks at the hotel website to start their search. So in other words, you go on Google, you're typing hotels anywhere in Australia, Booking.com comes up the first, you look at it, you then filter and look at all the different options in the market, you choose one or two, you talk to your wife says, I say number one, or your partner, or your husband, and what will happen is that then you will go and look for what the Trivago girl on TV told you, you can get the best price or better price for the same room, for the same hotel, and so you end up going back to Google and typing the hotel name, and then you've got a very high intent to book that particular hotel. So this is when you see a lot of competition from a pricing and from a marketing perspective from OTAs and etc. And for us, direct as well, with our good book direct discount, etc. So first question to Nick, really. Nick, you've got the whole tech stack, etc. You basically get a lot of stats on that. Is that actually changed? And is technology actually play a role in that as well, in a way that this change? I'm thinking voice. Hey Google, I want to go somewhere. Is that going to completely break this cycle?
No, thanks for that, Matthias. So I guess our lens into the changing distribution landscape is primarily coming from the data driven by our customers on the Synexus platform. And I guess the driving force we've seen over the course of the last couple of years changing the distribution landscape really has been the rise of leisure. I think the importance of leisure and its growing prominence in everyone's market segmentation has been called out in most of the panels so far. The way that's manifesting itself, certainly for our customers, is primarily through growth in two channels. So online direct is probably one example, and the second example is through voice. So whether it's our call centres or people using our voice agent technology as well. When it comes to booking engine, online direct or brand.com bookings, as a data point to sort of back that up, as of Q3 last year across our implementation or our installed database of hotels, by Q3 last year, our hotels were already driving more online direct bookings through the booking engine and through brand.com than they were in 2019. So it really is a channel that's leapt forwards in terms of prominence and importance.
Yeah, I think we've seen that as well across our network, with people wanting to do more direct because of the horror stories of not getting a refund, or and they put essentially all the travel agent and online travel agent in the same basket. I may as well call the hotel, so I know what's going to happen in uncertain times. Tim, have you seen the same thing? Have you seen actually a change in that particular behavior? Do you still see hotels or your site at the top of the funnel, and where does it go from there? Or?
Yeah, I mean the truth of data is 2017 was 35 years ago in terms of internet years.
But we've had a
pandemic, couple of wars, and a whole bunch of stuff.
And
2 coups in Thailand during that time. But I think, and that has changed a lot. But what we're seeing through here, this domestic saved COVID, and we've seen that not just obviously here in Australia, but I can tell you in Asia it's still the only saving grace. Like Thailand is basically a domestic market only. Korea, Taiwan, basically domestic markets only. And that favours brand.com. It gives brand.com an advantage, particularly in drive markets. Like if you're 2 hours outside of Seoul or 3 hours outside of Sydney, of course brand.com is going to get an advantage from that. But I think also this part of it came from mix shift. You know, as corporate went to zero, of course your OTA channel and your direct channel goes up as a mix because your corporate's gone to zero, your wholesale, your inbound is near zero, so a lot of it is mix shift. And on the meta search side, hasn't COVID helped Google out? Hasn't COVID helped Google out? They have doubled down, tripled down on what I call their never-ending march into travel. And they've taken strong advantage of the sort of COVID downturn to build products and get smarter and so forth. So I think a lot of that is wrapped up in having domestic save COVID, and we may see shifts of that change again when international comes back. It's very hard for brand.com
and is
Australia to advertise to the Europeans, to the Scandinavians.
Do you see it at the moment
we
going?
See that already. Like we see that.
Where is that coming from?
Well, we can glance to what the future of post-COVID looks like because we can see it in America right now. America is post-COVID.
Okay.
Obviously it doesn't have all the international inbound back, but domestically it is post-COVID, and we've seen a bit of that shift starting to happen already there.
Andrew, is that what you're seeing as well? Or?
Yeah, very much so. So, I mean, we'll look at it from a slightly different stance in the sense that we're not competing with direct customers, right? So our clients are the agents, but absolutely, America's recovered. Europe's very much above 2019 levels now. It's really just APAC. And APAC outside of Australia. I mean, I talked to my colleagues looking after Singapore and Japan and Hong Kong, and like there is nothing. Like we're talking 95% down. Whereas here, I think what's been really interesting is that's also been a lot of business coming from perhaps non-traditional channels. If you think about clients like banks with their redemption points, people have been spending that on travel, which is a different segment, which is offline.
We've seen Qantas here moving a lot into the accommodation market and getting a lot of share with using the loyalty because I couldn't fly, ultimately saying, yeah, you can book a hotel with your points as well, and really moving into that market,
Absolutely, that's been really aggressive. And even agents as well. I mean, there's been a lot of travel credit, particularly in the first 12 to 18 months of the pandemic, where people had booked overseas travel, had credit to use, and they've gone and used that domestically. But that's continued even today. So I think what we're starting to see now is, whilst there is some inbound coming back and as borders open up for Australian outbound travel, I think that the domestic piece will stay. I think a few people mentioned it before in the earlier discussions, and I think that will be, the inbound or the international business will be incremental to that, at least for the first couple of years. It'll be interesting to watch.
So one of the things I want to talk about is the meta search. I think it's probably the most competitive space at the moment from a marketing perspective, at least in our industry. Would you agree? Yeah.
Oh, incredibly so, but I think, as I said, I think Google is just winning more and more market share.
In what way?
Well, in the sense that they're just getting more eyeballs. Like the recovery for eyeballs in meta search has favour in Google over the other meta search providers.
Is that because they changed through the top?
Because they
top
changed the
and
display. Because they doubled down on the product.
But they offer hotelier an organic feed as well, which is more promoting direct, which sort of the organic feed HPA. If you want one takeaway, go and talk to your booking engine provider and connect it, because that's the cheapest form of meta you can do, really, if you don't want to spend upfront money. But it's hyper competitive at the moment, and I want to talk about the PPC spend. So that's one where you actually guys, ultimately the guest comes in, they're already putting the name of the hotel, there's very high intent to purchase. So it's also where I would think there's a lot more shenanigans happening. You know, I want to go straight into the subject, but keep it relatively low, low key. I think we're all doing stuff around rate parity, looking at it. I think there's a pot calling the kettle black because we're also doing book direct discount. So there's a bit of that. But I think also Hotelbeds, you had obviously a reputation. Andrew,
Careful.
I've been having so many discussions with you over the years, but one that actually highlighted and made my day during COVID is you were telling me everything you've done to actually alleviate that. Can you tell me more?
Yeah, they've been robust, haven't they?
Yeah.
Look, I think, a lot of this predates COVID. I think that the conversation on rate parity has shifted globally, and you only need to talk to the global chains around this. It's more around control as opposed to B2B and B2C. And I think ultimately now it's around deciding what type of distribution you expect from your customers and what they can deliver for you. And I think COVID's also accelerated and consolidated a lot of that space now, as you've seen with some of the large wholesale deals announced between some of the large OTAs and some of the largest global hotel chains. So I think for us, we had to adapt, otherwise you just couldn't survive. You cannot compete with a Booking.com and an Expedia in terms of OTA business, and an Agoda for that matter. when there's nothing else for you to offer. So for us, it's about ensuring that with our clients we have very clear distribution policies. 3 strikes in terms of distributing online, and then you lose access to all of the best content. But I think as well, it's also about understanding a client. It's not as simple as saying don't sell online. There are multiple channels that you can sell to that will eventually end up on a meta search, and you need to invest time and technology into understanding every single one of your clients and putting control mechanisms in place to do that. So we've got a team that manages every single day. There's about 5 of them. Every single test booking that comes through we review. We've partnered with RateGain, and we proactively rate shop on behalf of hotels, because ultimately we see this as an opportunity to grow. And I think that the B2B segment had to adapt into that environment, because otherwise there was going to be no business left.
And you lost some business out of it.
We did. Well, ultimately, right, if you said that we're only going to work with partners that can control their distribution, we'll back ourselves every day of the week. But I think what's also driving this is what's needed from our clients, so our customers. And they also understand that if this didn't shift, ultimately you would just be taking feeds from the OTA space, and B2B wouldn't exist anymore. You would essentially just be taking all of your corporate business, all of your leisure business, or your inbound and your wholesale business from 1 or 2 players. So if that didn't change, then that would be, I would argue, very risky for hotels to have that level of reliance.
Okay, so Timothy, you're obviously heading in Asia Pac. You're heading Triptease, and Triptease has been very strong with regards to the conversion aspect of it, and ultimately showing different prices that the hotel booking direct is actually better. And then you moved into Meta as well, which was a space you're still playing with actively as well. It's an expensive space. What do a hotel need to do to actually get into that space in a cost-effective way? We've seen SiteMinder, we've seen TravelClick moving into that space with demand services. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, I think it is an expensive space. The cost per click this year, from January to now, has gone up 40% within Australia itself.
Now, how much is a click in comparison to display advertising on Meta?
Well, the cost per click for Google hotel ads is actually a lot more expensive now.
Okay.
Display ads are cheaper because you're talking about retargeting. If I understand what you just said, like retargeting on other sites like news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald. Are you talking about SEM? Then that's a different cost altogether with AdWords. But all of these are going up. Overarching all of that as a foundation, and I know revenue managers here will probably want to give me evil eyes because I'm going to say this: rate parity. We don't talk about Bruno, we don't talk about rate parity. Encanto, anyone? No, okay. So in rate parity, what is on your booking engine is very different to what is on meta search parity. These are 2 very different things. And meta search parity is a whole different ballgame. Now, when the cost per click is going up, why do you want to still bid when you're out of parity? And that's, I think, a lot of hoteliers have sort of gotten a bit blindsided with recently, with a lot of OTAs, throwing a lot of money at Google hotel ads, even though they're more expensive than the hotel. But as a hotel, and I'm speaking because of my experience working in hotels, why do you want to distribute your product on any platform on someone else's terms but your own? Your best price is direct, and that's what every website says. Your meta search pricing has to reflect that. So, do you have a provider that can black out your bids when you're more expensive? Do you have a provider that can boost your bids when you are cheaper direct?
So ultimately, you're just really looking at those searches that you can, let's call it hijack, really, that will have the highest intent but at the highest conversion ultimately, so you get your ROI.
Exactly. Social ads are no longer giving people the ROI that they need. Other websites, you're getting impressions, but you may not be getting conversions.
Yep.
So it's all about quality. I think at the moment, hotels are facing a lot of challenges, as we heard this morning. Your sellable inventory is not what it used to be. The question is, for your distribution strategy, what is it that you want as a hotel? Is it quality or is it quantity?
Yeah.
I've got to call out from the OTA perspective, and meta search and PPC we should talk about a lot. But our number one channel is the app, right? There's probably another thing that's changed in 2017 is most major OTAs are now 50+% direct, of which the app is 60-70% of that. So and then because the app has become this tool, we can talk to customers, we can give them content, we can communicate with them, we can get on their phones, we can go on the journey. So of course we spend a lot of time at the OTAs with big teams and big budgets on meta search and PPC, but the biggest teams are on apps and the quality of our content and rates on the apps.
But the download rates tend to fall when it comes to apps. So does it increase for you? Or?
Well, I think if you look at 2021 over 2020, it was a bumper year for app downloads.
Okay.
But geographically skewed.
Okay.
Right, the US and Europe saw double numbers of app downloads in 2021 versus 2020 or something like that.
Okay.
But Asia was flat. Now that sounds weird, but for 2021 to be a flat year in terms of app download numbers in markets that were locked down for half of it is an extraordinary symbol, right?
Okay.
The whole of Asia and Australia too went through what I call the digital boot camp. Right, everything we learned how to do on the phone: order food, watch content, buy things, and that boot camp has created a step change in the phone.
We jumped a couple of generations.
We jumped a couple of generations. We have gone from something in the 40s to something in the 60s, and it's going to keep going.
And I want to go back. The meta search is, I was reading that so if you think about Google and Google Nest, so Google is a meta search. Google Nest is ultimately what you will have in your own house. Then you've got Kayak providing inventory on meta search for Alexia. Then you've got potentially, I think it was Microsoft Cortana getting it from Trivago and so on. So I can see a link here between the devices and the meta. And I want to spend a bit more time here because Matt over here, that's just very quiet at the end there, he's sort of done a bit of research in terms of that and lower down the funnel how you could sort of almost lasso a booker that may have gone astray onto third parties to bring them back direct. How does it work?
Yeah, Matthias. So I guess the biggest challenge with any property from a book direct strategy is that meta does become a very easy avenue for you to turn on to be able to generate traffic, and obviously PPC and other things as well. But the reality is that, as we've already heard, people are shopping around, so they'll go to a range of different channels. And so what we've done is we've actually built a product. It's a consumer travel app called Cherry, which if someone goes to your page on any OTA site, we actually pop up a browser extension app, and we actually say that there's a better offer available to actually book with the hotel directly, and we actually take the person across to the hotel at that particular point. We obviously fence that around an opaque offer, which is hidden behind a discount code, and we actually engage with the user from that perspective.
How important is pricing then on, if I look at that, how many more clicks the lowest price will actually get on Meta? Probably Timothy, you might have the stats. Do you know that? And to what instance, if I'm offering $99 instead of $100, how many clicks more will I get?
If you're cheaper direct, you would get double the number of clicks as opposed to if you are being undercut.
So rate parity is so important.
Rate parity is actually, it's important.
And so technology ultimately is playing a part in that as well. And I'm looking at what we're trying to do with connectivity and all that. If you had a single piece of advice in terms of non-negotiable technology that a hotel should be having to actually perform, what would that be moving forward?
Are you talking in terms of, sorry, I assume.
In terms of system, in terms of having something implemented to be able to perform in that in that funnel ultimately?
I would say look for a provider that can automate your bids for you.
Yeah.
Because everyone's been talking about staffing shortages. I didn't want to bring that up again, but you need, as a human, you're not going to be able to sit there and change bids 15 times a day. And the thing is, that meta search bidding process is very robust. So you need a system and a software that knows how to change these bids based on geographical location, based on device, based on length of stay, based on the dates as well. That is actually quite important, and also knowing when to black out the bids and drop the bids.
What do you see, Tim, in terms of tech that's actually, you look at a hotel and you say, why don't they have that in place?
Well, the biggest thing we did in the back end in technology was improve all of our supply connectivity. So we spent the last 2 years revolutionising the way we connect to supply connectivity. And that was driven by the dramatic shortening in lead times, right?
Okay.
Suddenly all these bookings were coming in today for tomorrow, and we needed to be 100% certain that the rates we were looking at, the availability we were looking at,
So
was
it's
the
all
right
about
stuff.
optimization of pricing and optimization
Yeah.
of inventory and optimization of...
And certainty, right? So, like,
Okay.
shortening lead times meant certainty had to be an absolute requirement, especially if we're working in, which we all were, fully refundable environments. So you've got fully refundable plus short lead times plus customers all over the place. We needed to be certain. I think so. If I was to give my advice to hoteliers, that's going to stay around for a while, and so you're going to have to make sure your connectivity solutions and your rate availability solutions are the best they can be.
So it's on point, and even if you actually want to optimize your pricing, revenue, etc., you just need to have that, multiple times a day, ultimately, not once.
Yeah, and we're still going to be in for a while where the rates you're putting on Thursday are going to get booked on Friday. So how often on Thursdays are you reviewing
So
them?
you need revenue manager to hold your pants a bit more, perhaps. I don't know. It's And
Yeah, I was just going to say, just a slightly different perspective. I mean, we're talking about valuable exercises in terms of search engine marketing and better search to try and acquire the customer. What's pretty important as well as we have the technology that allows us to engage the customer once we've acquired them, so that they come back to us directly next time. So whether it's a CRM or loyalty platform that allows you to upsell the customer before they get on site, whether it's a CRM platform, for example, that allows you to continue the conversation, to grow that relationship, so the next time around you're not paying meta search sites clicks to try and get them back.
So it's all go back to
You've
the
already
old
got them on board.
loyalty and just basically looking after you guys, get them to come back. But I deal with independent every day. They don't come back often. I've got only 25% guest rate returns, and otherwise they go somewhere else. So how do you do that? It's difficult. That's probably why you're winning the game with independents. Andrew, is that what, from a B2B, you were mentioning different segments that actually you're working with that's sort of returning as well. I think there was loyalty programs. There was your retail agents as well, and so on. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, and I think this is an important point that we spent a lot of time talking about competing for customers that are going to come direct or via Meta or via OTAs. But there are customers that will book through other channels. And I think what COVID has done is obviously skewed things very, very heavily towards the B2C space. But the B2B space is coming back. And if I look at our business today into Australia, we're trading again above 2019 levels for the last probably 6 or 7 weeks. And our booking lead time is still historically long. We're talking probably more than 40% of our business being booked more than a month in advance.
Where is that coming from?
From trade agents, so
From
retail
trade
agents.
So
So,
which region?
Oh, it's across all of Australia.
Okay,
so there's not
okay.
one particular area. I think.
And is that coming from the UK, from Europe, from the
No, I'm
US,
talking
or?
specifically at the moment about domestic Australian agents.
Okay.
So in terms of inbound markets, the UK is starting to come back. I've got a call with Tourism Australia tonight, actually, around the current stuff that they're doing with their campaign with TTG, I think, which kicked off this week. Yeah. So that's coming back, and if you look at that market, for example, already the cruise agents are talking to us saying we need content for April 2024. So it's not even about rate, it's just about having rooms available, even if it's just pushing your dynamic rates through the existing rate for the next 750 days, which you can do on the channel managers now. This is the type of conversations that we're having now. So I think it's important to keep an eye on that. It's not going to be your 50% of your business right now, but I think what has tended to happen is, I think Nikita mentioned it before actually in the previous panel, that it's important to have an overarching conversation around all commercial opportunities and engaging the directors of sales and marketing.
So it's going back to that balanced distribution ultimately. So it's almost that nothing has changed. It's sort of going back to the normal sort of cycle pattern of we still need to play the different segment, different distribution channels.
I think the thing that has changed though is the speed of which things can change is astounding. Across all the world, we've seen markets go on and off, and domestic only, and some inbound. And each time they've turned on with a ferocity that has surprised us every time. So you could easily be sitting there saying, "Oh, inbound to Australia is pretty poor right now, so I won't pay attention to B2B for Europe." I can tell you when it turns back on, it could come back on in a way that would just be fantastically scary.
And is that based on a restriction ultimately? We lift restriction.
It's based on restrictions and then capacity. As soon as the airline, as soon as that airline capacity is back on and people can fly to Australia relatively cheaply, they will come.
Do you have flight data? Do you use flight data to evaluate search or something? And
You're asking, I don't know what exactly what
don't
the data
know?
scientist
Okay.
team does. I know they've got a whole bunch of signals.
Okay.
But the number one signal starting point is always search data. You know, both Google search data and our own. And every time a restriction is unhooked, our servers start to burn because the search volumes are extraordinary. So the return will come, will surprise us all.
Okay, happy days. Seems that nothing much changed except for technology. So I don't know, I'm just going to put it to the panelists, and in terms of, you know, adding value to that discussion, distribution, meta, OTA, same or changed, to me it seems that it's pretty much the same and sort of going back to normal. There was an element of tech, there was an element of focusing on meta, focusing on rate parity, focusing on those. There's a lot of the distributors doing a lot to actually try to bridge that gap that we experience. You've got a lot of new technology coming in from the guys of Cherry over here, trying to think of it innovatively. Hard word to say for a Frenchman. Any other aspect of that discussion you want to touch on, guys?
I think for me, I would have to say that the landscape has definitely changed. There is more of a need for hotels to be on meta search and to be actively bidding on meta search, as opposed to just staying on what is organic.
Okay.
I mean, that's great if you're not on meta search at the moment, but if you are thinking of doing organic, why would you not be more prominent in a pricing aggregator where you potentially where you're competing with other third parties?
Third parties, okay.
And I think there is more of a need for hotels to own first-party data, and that is going to change dramatically outside of meta search, and that needs to be factored into a hotel's distribution strategy, where it's not just about, again, it's not just about volume, it's about the quality of volume. It's about the quality of traffic and the quality of guests, and owning that guest relationship from the very start. We talk about bespoke experiences. That has to start before the guest gets to your hotel, and you can't do that without the guest data.
Okay. Is that guest details you're going to start providing them?
Well, I suppose we provide a lot of guest details.
Except the email address and the phone number.
Well, I tell you, I don't think it would. I tell you, it wouldn't change very much. And I'll tell you why it wouldn't change very much. You know, the OTA is not a place that steals your repeat customers. We just don't. We don't do that. We look at our data, for example. I looked at 2 years worth of data, and less than 10% of our repeats were at the same hotel chain, and less than 5% of our repeats were at the same property. So our customers are not typically the type of people who spend 3 different visits at one of your hotels, or 4 or 5. Yeah. Our customers are the one who move around and stay at different properties. So I don't think that would change much of the story.
So Booking.com CEO, I think, was saying, our job is to provide the customers. Your job is to make sure at the cost of acquisition, and your job as a hotelier is to make sure it comes back to you direct. And I think also to me that was relatively relevant to a certain extent. Some may argue, some may not, I don't know. One thing that touched on it was the mobile, and I think I see too often across particularly the landscape, whilst the brand is sophisticated, I see so many independent hotels cutting corners with the technology and the way it looks and the mobile first and those sort of things. And if I just want advice to give, is just make sure your technology stack is actually up to scratch. And if you're trying to compete with a Ferrari driving a Fiat, ultimately that's going to be what you're going to get. You're going to lose the race.
The only thing I'd say about mobile, and I totally agree with all that, and a mobile-first approach is absolutely super important. However, I think what COVID has done is it's actually brought the scale back onto desktop a little bit, focus back onto desktop a little bit as well. We're at this rapid pace where everyone was getting to 70-80% of their traffic coming through mobile, but because people have been at home for the last 2 years, and are still at home now in many respects, desktop has actually come back. And I've seen so many go so far the other way, that mobile is the only experience they've got, and they've got nothing on desktop then as well. So there's still a blend that needs to be had across both.
Yeah, the stats still show that you get more bookings on desktop. Nick, any final words?
I think just something Tim touched on before, which is very relevant, is the fact that we are moving to a cookieless world. So by middle of next year, I think there won't, unless you have first-party data, your ability to retarget it, to market to a lot of these customers is going to disappear. So jump forward now, take action to position yourself to succeed once the world changes and cookies are no longer an option you can leverage.
Okay, happy days. I think that's sort of a wrap, I think. So technology, mobile, meta, and so on. Just keep doing it, but probably invest more in it, perhaps.
I just want to close with one second from someone who, even though my accent is Australian, I haven't been on a panel in Australia for 9 years, but I've sat there and watched this devastated Asia, travel industry wiped out by this. But I also am the most confident I've ever been about the return of an industry, because I've seen every chance when the traveller could get back on a bus or a boat or a plane or a train, they jumped on it.
Yep.
And we will be stunned, barring another Putin-esque piece of crap, we will be stunned by how quickly people get back on planes. And we've got a lot of good times ahead.
Well, on that note, I'm going to leave you to it, guys, and thank you very much.